Can everyone hear me better now? Should it be okay? It's okay? Okay, good. So sorry, we're still trying to figure out the sound setup a little bit. We have two cameras going on, so I just have my overhead camera right next to me. Thank you again for joining me today in the second episode of Stitching with Stephanie. If everyone wants to write where they're from, I'd love to know. I'm here in Calgary and it's May 1st, so you'd think the birds would be out, the grass would be green, but I received a warning on my phone yesterday about a snow warning. So it's been snowing yesterday and it's snowing outside right now too. So we definitely still have our snow scrapers in our car to make sure we can drive home safely and everything too. So still pretty cold around here, but that's Calgary for you. Today, we're going to be talking about the block of the month, and that's primarily what we're going to be concentrating on. So it's not going to be quite as long as last week's video, where I kind of talked a little bit more about myself, how I got into stitching, and the rinse away design sheet. I also showed some different stitching on the previous video, so if you wanted to just play it in the background while you guys are stitching away, you definitely can. Even for today, you can grab your little stitching projects and some tea and we can get started. So first and foremost, I'm sure most of you guys are here to see the block of the month. So let me just grab it here for you. I know we've uploaded the digital versions, so you kind of have an idea of what it already looks like. It might already also be in your emails, but if you haven't seen it yet, da-da-da! The third block is a robin. So I'll hold it up for you here. And I'll do a little bit of an unboxing so you guys can see and take off this plastic here. So I have the real thing next to me, but I'll go through what's in this pattern first, and then I'll go through the actual stitched out version next to me. So when you receive it in the mail, it'll be sealed in this plastic here. And to give a little bit of a recap to those who are a little bit less familiar with our block of the month, we had a block of the month last year that was a flower pattern, but it was only foundation paper piecing. This year, we also have a block of the month. It's our second ever block of the month with Wonderfill. It's bird themed, and we decided to release it in foundation paper piecing and also wool applique. So this today is about wool applique for our block of the month bird watcher. So here is the front of the package. So it's a detailed image of what all the stitches look like. We definitely tried to make it more high definition so you could see the details of the stitch and find where everything goes. And it's pretty close to a 1-to-1 size ratio with what you'll get inside. If I turn it around here, you'll see some descriptions on the left here. And then on the right is the recommended threads. So what you're going to find on the recommended threads are eleganza in solid colors and eleganza in the variegated colors. And you'll see the difference when you see the M on the back of the code, and that stands for multicolor. And these are the ones that will be recommended. Alana is our 12-weight wool thread, and that's primarily used for what we applique the wool down with. But what's special about this block is we're actually going to use some of the Alana to embellish the robin as well. So that makes it really fun. And the wool thread is definitely not limited to just doing the applique, but you can also do decorative work with it too. So now I'm going to open what's inside of this package. Ta-da! And so here you are, all the pre-cut pieces set out and ready for you. You just have to layer these correctly and tack them down, and then you can start appliquing away. So you can kind of see right here, we've just loosely put the pieces down, and then you can rearrange them so they match the picture and location a little bit better, like this. Then you can applique. I always say just be mindful of how you're layering So for example, you do want to start with the pieces that are furthest back. So in this case, it would be the tail, and then after the tail, you'd want to put down the belly or this body piece before the orange piece, and then before this gray piece. So just be mindful of how you're layering it all together there. And for those who are wondering, this is mill dyed merino wool. So it's not hand dyed, but it's mill dyed. So it has a very even finish, and our wool is from Australia. It's Australian merino wool. So that's what's in your pre-cut wool kit here. When I remove this, then we'll have the pattern. So the pattern has a legend right here, all the threads listed again right here, and you'll actually be able to match up what type of stitch goes where. So for example, the leaf is a fishbone stitch. Right here is a stem stitch right there. So every month I try to include one or two new stitches. So as you're going through this block of the month, you can learn something new. And excuse my voice, I caught a cold. I know it's a weird time of year to catch a cold, but again, like I said, it's snowing outside, and I've been traveling for shows, so excuse my stuffy voice. On the other side of this booklet is the written instruction. So it even lists out which Alana color you should be using to applique which part of the body. So this is the bottom half of the body with EN50, which would be kind of that white or beigey color of Alana. And then it goes through each stitch bolded here and then with the color code listed there. And if you're wondering what these codes are referring to, I'm quickly going to just put this back and show you the thread packs that we have. So if I could just switch to the other camera. And Bethany is behind the camera helping me out today, so she'll be answering some of your simple questions in the chat. And if there's anything I'm missing, she'll let me know. So that's just who I'm talking to today. So for this wool kit, we have 3 thread packs. Many of you guys have already seen it, but just to reiterate to some of you who haven't, this is the tin box. It's called the Birdwatcher right there. And then there's 2 tin boxes available, and one is I grabbed 2 variegated, but one is variegated and one is solid, and it'll be noted on the side of the tin. When you open it, it'll have all those threads that are previously listed on the instruction sheet, which one goes where. So this is one of the kits you can get there. Secondly is the Alana thread pack right here. So there's 11 threads, and this is the wool acrylic thread that would be included and what is used to applique. And then on the back are all the color codes and another description. All the color codes will also be listed on the top of each spool. So you don't need to worry about having to match it or needing a color card. It is listed on the top of each spool there. All right. So now I want to show you the reveal of the actual block. So here's the robin. None of our blocks have been pieced together yet, which is nice, so we can show you one at a time. But this is the robin that has been stitched out. Here it is laid down, and I'm just going to actually hold it up here too so you can see the full size. And then this guy's kind of chubby. Someone told me he looks like a popsicle stick if the tail is the popsicle stick itself and the body is the ice cream. So what's new about the robin block here is actually the bullion knots that you see along the body here and the Pekinese stitch right there, and that goes around the whole body. And the special thing that I was mentioning before was we actually used a wool thread for this little highlight or accent piece near his head, and that is using Alana. So I think Some people might be familiar with these stitches, but everyone's learning, and there's a lot of different level of stitchers out there. So today I'm actually going to be stitching the Pekinese stitch out for you and the Bullion knot out for you, and showing you the difference between the wool thread and a cotton thread. So first of all, I wanted to show you some cotton threads that I have just right here. And without zooming in or even moving the thread, there's actually a light sheen to the cotton. I think cotton is mostly known for being matte, and that is true when you're holding it up to a rayon thread or a polyester thread, but all our cottons are double gassed, which means we've put it through a process during manufacturing where it goes through a tiny little flame to remove 80% of lint the first time, and then we do it twice, so we remove another 80%. So it leaves you with a really clean cotton. And this is really nice for hand stitching or machine work because there's less grabbies that are on your thread when you're pulling it through cotton or whatever material you're using. And it also leaves you with a really clean finish when you're doing your stitch work with it. So now that I have these laid down flat, I'm actually going to grab just one of them and kind of tilt it in the light. And I do have just regular lights in the studio today, some studio lights coming down, but you'd be able to see this in regular sunlight too. There's a bit of the sheen on the thread. Now, I'm going to grab the Alana thread, and this is the wool acrylic thread. And this is going to be a lot more flat because wool thread is naturally fuzzy. It's not shiny at all. You can actually see the fuzzies on the side of the thread, even just holding it on this white background. And side by side, you can really tell how one absorbs the light and one actually reflects the light a little bit. And that's really quite obvious when you have them side by side here. So on the robin today, we're going to be using a little bit of the wool to do the accent on its head. So I'm just going to bring this right back here. And this is where you're going to see the wool thread. And it's going to be the same texture as the wool fabric versus when you look at the cotton thread here. There's a light sheen every time you use cotton thread that is quite clean. So there it is. Do we have any questions yet? No, I think we're still good. So next up, I'm just going to do some stitches for you to see. The first thing I want to show you is how to do a bullion knot. And you use. So I mentioned this in last week's video as well, but it's important that you're going to be using a milliner's needle. So right here, milliners. This can also be referred to as a straw needle, and this simply means that the needle itself is a bit longer, and it's also the same width from top to bottom. So I'm just going to move this so you can see it a little bit better. The needle itself doesn't widen at any point. It's just going to be the same from top to bottom. And the reason why this is important is because when you're doing things like bullion knots or French knots, you're going to be wrapping thread around the needle, the shaft of the needle, and pulling it through. And if there's any extra width at the top of your needle, you're going to have a lot more strain on your hand to try and pull that needle through your wraps. And that's not good for your hand. It probably will affect how your stitches look. So having a milliner's needle is very important when you're doing the bullion knot. Another thing you'll notice is the length of the needle is pretty long compared to like a chenille needle or any other type of needle you use. Again, this is so you can either add more wraps onto the needle before you pull it through and have a little bit more ease with that, so you're just working with a little bit more space. These needles are also really common for big stitch hand quilting or sashiko, this type of length, because you can load quite a few stitches on this type of needle before you pull it through. So I have my needles pre-threaded just to make things a little bit more efficient. But I did want to show you also the different sizes. So I have here, let me put these in order. Okay, so I have in order the different sizes of needles that Sue Spargo offers, which is a milliner's 3, 1, and 15. I'm not entirely sure why it kind of like why the sizing goes in that sequence. I know more about thread than I do needles, but this is the size that she refers to. Another easy way to remember if you have this size of spool especially is we've color coded the thread spool to the needle size required. So it makes it very easy to remember which needle you need for which size of thread, as you can see. So another really important thing to mention is that thread weight kind of feels inverse when you recognize what the weight means. So the lower the number, the thicker the thread, the higher the number, the thinner the thread. So we have a 3, a 5, and an 8. So in this instance, the 3 would be the thickest thread, the 8 would be the finest thread. So I have the 8 weight threaded through here on my milliner 3 needle. The 5 weight threaded through my milliner 1 needle, and then lastly I also have the 3 weight thread on my milliner 15, and I think it's a little bit hard to tell off the camera, but this needle is super thick compared to this needle here, which is for the 8 weight. So this is 8 weight and this is 3 weight. And sometimes people ask how it compares to floss. I would say a 3 weight would be similar to using all 6 strands of floss. A 5 weight would be similar to using 4 strands of floss. And the 8 weight would be similar to using 2 to 3 strands of floss. So that's kind of how it measures up. For my example, I'm going to be using the number 5 because I think it'll be just a little bit easier to see on camera. So I'm just going to grab that one, move my needles aside here. So when you're doing a bullion knot, let's say in this instance, because our bird has bullion wraps that are about this long, okay? So we'd start here and then the second stitch would be at the end right there. So I'm just going to show you really quick. When I'm working with wool, I do tend to add a little bit of a knot at the end. I know some people feel more comfortable not adding a knot, but I think when you're working with wool, it's pretty forgivable in terms of its loftiness will hide a lot of the lumps and bumps at the back of your work. So I do typically add a knot when I'm working with wool. So first, you bring your thread up. Then you're just going to go the distance that you want the length of your bullion knot to be. I'm going to go a little bit further just because I'm using a thicker thread. That's where I go in. And I'm actually just going to come out right next to where my thread went in. So right there, right next to. And you don't want to pull your needle all the way through first. You're actually just going to hold it and then you can start wrapping. So you just count, especially if you have a row of bullions and you want to keep it pretty consistent. You count the number of wraps that you have so you know what to do every time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm just going to check to see if that's long enough. I want it a little bit longer. 9, 10, 11. So there, I'm going to go with 11. And one thing that to note is you do want to keep a certain level of tautness in your wraps. You don't want it too loose or like loose at the bottom, tight at the top. You want to kind of keep it even, and you can even it out by twisting it a little bit with your fingers to loosen or tighten certain areas like this. Okay, so I'm just going to pinch this with my fingers so my wraps don't come undone. Push my needle through and just grab it from the top. And then you just kind of have to work your bullion around until it tightens. So there's your first bullion knot, like this. And to finish off the stitch, you're actually just going to go back under. I like to go on the inside of my bullion knot so it looks like it's finished one last wrap around. So I'm just going to pull the needle through. And there's the first bullion knot. I'm going to hold it up. So with the 5 weight, you can actually see each wrap pretty defined. I'm not sure how clearly that comes across on the camera, but perhaps we might post a photo or something like that after on Instagram, on our Instagram story, if you guys are curious what it looks like in more high definition. But this is what your bullion knot looks like. Something that actually I consider when I do my bullion knots, especially if I'm using a thicker thread or a thread with a slightly looser twist, such as Dazzle. So Dazzle, you can see here, if I just grab the end of it, you can actually see the twist. It's a little bit more loose, which is why the end of Dazzle, if I just kind of poke it around, it can actually like fray open a little bit. So the twist is a little bit looser on Dazzle. When I'm using these types of thread, I'll actually consider the direction that I'm twisting in. So again, I'm just going to go in for a second one. I wrapped in this direction of my first one, like this, forward then behind. Sometimes it'll actually look better if I wrap it from the back to the front. And I would say for the 5 weight, you could actually even tell the difference because I'm wrapping in the same direction that the thread is naturally twisted, how it's made. So it'll look different versus if you're wrapping in a direction different than the way that the thread was twisted or the strands are twisted together. I know that's a little bit confusing, but it actually does create a different result. So I'm just going to finish this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Push that down. 10, 11. Okay. So again, I'm just going to pinch my fingers here, push my needle through, grab my needle from the top here, and then slowly kind of work my bullion knot down, like so. And then you get your second bullion knot. So I think it looks a little bit more intimidating than the actual stitch is. It's not too difficult. It just takes a little bit more time to complete the stitch, as there's going to be quite a few. But the stitch itself is not too difficult, as you can see. And I think we will post a photo to show what wrapping the bullion knot in different directions will do to the thread, because I think you guys would be interested in seeing the detailed result of that. So that's that with bullion knots. I think I might actually show as well what it looks like if I do a bullion knot with Dazzle. I think that using rayon threads can be a little bit intimidating at times, but it's nothing different than using a cotton thread. You just have to be a little bit more mindful of, I would say, its slipperiness, but it's not more difficult. So this is Dazzle, an 8 weight rayon with 1 strand of metallic going through it. I'm just going to come up again. And I typically like to hold my thread down with my thumb so I can see what I'm doing. Go a short distance away, come back up, and then I'm just going to wrap 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I think I'm pretty happy with 10. Push the needle through. And here I wrapped it a little bit tight, so there we go. And that's the Dazzle bullion knot right there. Finish it off by tacking it down. So again, not any more or less difficult than doing it with eleganza, the cotton thread. I do have some samples here of bullion knots to show you. I just kind of showed you more of a straight line bullion knot, which is what all of these little guys are. We made this for an Easter project not too long ago. These are all bullion knots around each one. Definitely a good way to practice your bullion knots. And if I flip to this Easter egg right here, actually, these are actually also little bullion knots. So if you just decrease the stitch length of the bullion knot and increase the number of wraps you have, you can actually create these really nice loops to kind of create these butterfly wings. The body of this butterfly is actually also a bullion knot. So that just shows you kind of the diversity of what you can do with it. I know a really popular flower to make is a bullion rose, and that's simply adjusting your position of bullion knots so it creates kind of this overlapping rose effect. So that's definitely something you can do with a bullion knot. And let me see if I have everything here. Yep. So I have these two. And if any of you participated in our Christmas gingerbread decorating contest last December, this was the sample that I made. And I also added bullion knots here for the bushes. So this was kind of like a square oval piece of scrapbook. I had squoval, if you will, and I didn't know how to make it more textured or dimensional, so I just added bullion knots around the edge of it. And again, depending on how many wraps you do, you can either end up with a more straight bullion knot like the body of the butterfly, or you can add more wraps to increase how round or lifted it is from the fabric. So I really like using bullion knots. They're a pretty dynamic stitch because you can do so many cool things with it, but do not be intimidated. Bullion knots are very fun and easy to do. The next stitch I want to show you is the Pekinese stitch. And this always kind of takes me a minute to think about before I actually stitch it, because it involves a little bit of weaving over and under. So what I have here, well, actually, let me show you again what this Pekinese stitch is. So if we can just have the camera zoom in on this one. Yeah, there we go. So the outline of this bird is the Pekinese stitch. And you can't see it, I would say, the best because part of it is a little bit hidden under the bird. But essentially, you're looping thread underneath a back stitch. So you can use two different colors of threads, or you can use the same one. It's around the whole body, and it almost creates like a dimensional outline, almost like a secondary outline around the bird. And it's, again, not too difficult of a stitch. It just takes a little bit of extra thought for me to remember where everything goes. So I will show you how to do the Pekinese stitch. First off, the base of every Pekinese stitch is a back stitch right here, okay? How I like to begin is, oops, hopefully you can see the individual ones. This is my first back stitch and this is my second one. I like to come from the bottom. So again, I'm just going to put a tiny little knot on the back of my thread, like so, little knot. I come up from the middle of the second stitch, like so. And then I use the back of my needle, because it's blunt, to go underneath the first stitch from the top. So let me just put this flat so you can see. I'm going to insert the needle there. And the reason why you want to use the back of your needle instead of the front of your needle is so you don't split your stitches. It'll just kind of glide under. Kind of like how a tapestry needle works. You don't really want to split your fabric or your thread. Something important to note when you're doing this stitch is the tension on your thread. If you're pulling everything really tight, you're probably not going to get the result that you want. So just kind of keep your tension a little bit more loose so you keep that dimension of the stitch. So after you've woven it underneath the first stitch, you're actually going to go to the third one. So this is the first, the second, and here's my third back stitch. I'm just going to come back up like this. Again, watching the tension, and I'm going to leave it there. And this is what might take some finagling, if you will. You're going to go back through the second stitch, under that, the second stitch, and on top of where you wove that last one. So let me just take the needle away so you can see. This is my first stitch, my second stitch, my third back stitch. We're going to go underneath the second back stitch, but make sure you're over top of this woven thread. So I'm going to pull that through. Again, watching your tension. So if this is a little bit too loose, I'll use the back of my needle and kind of like pull on some thread here and there and tighten it to my desired tightness. So you can see again here, this is what it should look like. Your working thread should be on top of this back loopy one that we previously made, this one here. All right, so the next step is we're going to go to the next stitch, which is now our fourth stitch. Watching the tension, I'm going to stop there. Then you're going to go under the previous stitch, which is now the third stitch, under that stitch, over this thread. Like that. Again, I'm just going to play around with my tension, and I'm just going to keep stitching a few forward so you can see what I'm doing here. Under, over, like so. Again, I'm going to pull on these a little bit. Under, my back stitch, over the loop, and pulling your needle through. So once you have a bit of a rhythm going and understanding of how this stitch works, oops. Again, it's actually not too difficult. Under the back stitch, over the working stitch. Like that. And so I kept it pretty loose in this example here so you can see a little bit better on camera. Let me just hold it up. The loops that go in between. Each loop takes up 2 back stitches, so kind of keep that in mind. And that's how you move forward all the way around. And so I just did that all the way around the robin, all the way around. And again, you just have to manage your tension a little bit so it stays consistent. You can always play around with it with the back of your needle. But I really like these types of stitches because a back stitch is a great foundation for woven stitches like this. Even in the pin cushion I showed last week, this is also just a regular back stitch. This orange yellow variegated thread was my back stitch, and I used a 3-weight thread, and I just wove it under each one from alternating sides. So you can do so many fun things with a back stitch. And in this case, we did the Pekinese stitch. So there's 2 new stitches in this month's block of the month. So if you have any further questions, we will be posting a video of me demonstrating how to do this stitch again in a more high-def video, so you guys can replay that if you want to. But that is the essence of how to do a Pekinese stitch. If you have any questions, you can comment them down below. Bethany will definitely respond to all of you guys. I also wanted to mention that if you're curious about how to join the block of the month, I believe she will put a link in the post right now so you guys can see the landing page, decide if you want to join the foundation paper piecing one or if you want to give a go at the wool one. I know it can sound intimidating, especially if you've never done wool work before, but as you can see, it's very learnable. There's a lot of tutorials online in addition to just the ones that we're posting too. And you can get the pre-cut wool kit, like I've shown you right here. You also, of course, have the option to use wool scraps you have at home and use some eleganza with that. I did want to show you other options too if you don't want the pre-cut wool kit. We do sell wool in packs such as this and like this, so you get a variety of colors and not like huge yardages of one color, so you get a variety of this. This is all the mill dyed merino wool. When I was learning how to stitch, I would honestly just grab one sheet of this and play around with it, and that's actually how this was born, because this is half the size. So I just cut one of these like that, and this is how I made this. Really simple and easy. And if you do want a bigger piece of a certain color, we do sell a bunch of colors in fat 8s. So this is just one. I'll hold up the size so you guys can kind of see. So you can also buy the wool like this if you want to cut it yourself, or if there's just certain colorways you like to use a little bit more. But from my end, that is it for this episode of Stitching with Stephanie. Thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you have fun with the stitches. I love seeing everything in the Facebook group. If some of you guys are not part of the Facebook group yet, I strongly encourage you to join, either as a participant or even just an observer to see all the beautiful work that has been going on in our Block of the Month group. So thank you so much again for joining. I hope to see you guys next time on Stitching with Stephanie. Have a great rest of the week, and hopefully it warms up for wherever you are right now. Bye.